Well, greetings and salutations, test takers. This is Series 7 Guru coming to you from my off-grid studio, getting our kicks on Route 66 with our Tuesday ritual. Every Tuesday, 5 p.m., we do our live stream Q&A, Ask the Series 7 Guru. We hope to be able to help you with some content, have some fun, have some fellowship. And so we'll take care of some housekeeping, then we'll get right into answering any questions you may want to ask. Tell us what series exam you're taking, where you're joining us from. And be sure to share our Tuesday with any NASA or FINRA test takers you know. If you do have a question for us this evening, it's helpful if I know what test you're taking, because how they test on certain things is different. There's a lot of overlap, but the depth and what's testable on one exam may not. It's not necessary, but it's helpful. So, for example, if it's SIE, put SIE followed by a capital Q, and your question helps me pick it out of the chat. Or if you're taking a series exam, S7 or 65, whatever the case may is, followed by your question, that would be helpful. If you're looking for a free supplement to your paid study materials, there's nothing better than my free YouTube channel. I've organized the channel in series playlists. So you go to SIE, for example, there's 4 playlists. Those playlists are in suggested watch order. The videos in the playlist are in suggested watch order, but it's a buffet. You know, take what you like, leave what you don't. If you're going to a buffet and you like something, put it on your tray. If it's something you don't like, well, then don't put it on your tray. Now, if you're looking for a particular content, that's okay. Tonight, people are going to ask me questions that have been asked and answered many, many times. It's okay. But if you went to the channel search bar and you simply put spread or cash settlement or cash accounts or whatever it is, accrued interest, usually several videos will magically appear on that content. So don't be looking for a needle in a haystack. We have over 1,600 videos. So if you're looking for a particular topic or content, use that channel search bar. If you're looking for a paid supplement to your paid study materials, nothing better than a Kaplan Q Bank. All Kaplan products, you can get a 15% discount at checkout with Guru 15. At a Series 7 Q Bank, for example, with the discount, you get 3,600 plus performance opportunities. That's what I call practice questions, as well as a performance tracker. It's a bargain, best in class. The discount code works for all Kaplan products. Brian Lee, a managing member of Test Geek Exam Prep LLC, has been kind enough to give our viewers a 20% discount on Test Geek content. And that discount code is Guru20. I think Brian has the best distillation of the bridge from paid study materials to the actual test. All in on Brian, it's like $100. So if you're looking for a paid supplement, nothing better than a Q Bank. And Brian does have a practice test with each of his courses, his video courses, and they have very strong correlation to the actual exam. They're my favorite in terms of that. Now, everything on my YouTube channel is free. I don't sell you coffee cups, t-shirts, none of that. I don't sell channel memberships. Just doesn't speak to me. Most things on my booking page are not free. You know, there's very few things that are free. But one of the things you can find for free on my booking page is our weekly Q&A jam session. I think there's one coming up. If you go to deantenneytutoring.setmore.com, hit the class tab, you'll see that weekly Q&A jam session. You're welcome to register for that, and that is free. We have several communities. You are not alone. We have a Facebook community. Boy, we get in all kinds. We have over 1,200 members. We have chats for each of the series exams. Lots of people looking to form study groups there. Lots of testing victories. That social community is called Baby Brokers Doing Hat Tricks. Baby brokers are the term of endearment for rookies in the securities industry. And a hat trick is 3 successes in a limited time frame. Think SIE 766 or SIE 663. You get the idea. We also have some subreddit communities. We have for the Series 6, our subreddit called R Series 6. We have for SIE and Series 7, we have a subreddit called R Series 7. For all the NASA exams, we have a subreddit R Series 66. And for 9s, 10s, 79s, 57s, and 24s, we have a subreddit called R Series 24. All right, let's see what we got going on in the chat and see if we can be helpful there. Jason, I passed my SIE this afternoon. Woohoo! We ring the bell for testing victories. And Jason, I instituted a new thing over during the bell. We pour an adult beverage in your honor. The gift or gratuity rule does not apply to tutors like myself. And since I've instituted that, people have been sending me tequila, Johnny Walker Blue. Woohoo! So let me pour a little blue in your honor. Here we go. And did you see my cup this student got me? It says, that's what I do. I drink and I know things. Oh, yummy. Now on to my Series 6. Okay, well, we have a 6 playlist. Jason, I don't show as much love to Series 6s as I should. And so keep me posted. Come back here on a Tuesday. This is not for everybody, Jason. This offer is to you and to you only. I offer free office hours for paid students. I don't think, Jason, you're one of my paid students. But if you want, go to the deantenneytutoring.setmore.com, and you're welcome to sign up for one of those office hours and like to help you with your 6. Maybe we can do a practice test together, and we can put it on the channel for Series 6 folks, because I just don't think we show them as much love as they deserve. But kudos. Are you taking the 63 and 65 after your 6, or just your 63 after your 6 testing victory? That hurts. That hurts. Got a 70, man. In social media, this comes up quite a bit, unfortunately. This is my opinion. And, take it for what it's worth. My opinion is that people who get high, almost passing scores, it is not a knowledge deficit problem. In other words, you wouldn't have got a 70 if you weren't dedicated, you weren't disciplined, you weren't organized. And so that means we should find some other variable. And what I mean by that other variable is maybe test taking techniques. Like I just had somebody on social media today. I said, did you change your answers? That is a bad testing technique. Your flash response is your best response. You should never change answers unless you know you got it wrong. You know what the right answer is. Otherwise, leave it alone. I asked them in social media, did you create the Q bank of questions you want to come back and look at again? I think that's a losing strategy because it distracts you and it starts blinking and reminding you got these questions to go back. I think it's some other variable, right? You knew what they were asking. Don't know how you came up short. I will link to my video called You Failed, Is It Over podcast episode. Spoiler alert, the answer is no. But what you got to do is while the hurt is fresh, I have 5 recommendations on how to respond to this misfortune. And I'm not surprised you felt pretty prepared because that score reflects that you knew more than you didn't, unfortunately. So who knows? Could have been a face of death draw, could have been whatever. But let's, do a refresh and reset and then go back and get this thing done. Now, remember that the draws change. So just don't be weak on the stuff you're weak on. Hopefully, if you get the test specifications, Acolyte, from the 66, what I always suggest while the hurt is fresh is to go through that and put a plus minus 0. Plus means you don't think on the test specification, matches perfectly with your printout, by the way, that you don't think that was a problem. You were above par. That didn't do you in. 0 means you were at par passing. And counterintuitively, we're looking for minuses, things that you felt below par that we can bring above par. We want to overlearn on the second attempt. Any minuses we want to bring to par, any par above par, and eventually get everything over par, par being passing, right? So I think you should consider 63. I don't know if Vince is in the chat, but Acolyte, Vince was a person. Vince was in a 3-day 66 class with me. So I had a lot more feedback with him. And I was as surprised as he was that he missed his mark on the 66. We had this same conversation. And I said, Vince, I really think you know this stuff. I don't know what happened to you. I'm just as surprised as you. But as a plan B, this is not a plan A. The plan A is to pass the 66 the first time. I said, but there's a lot of overlap. But 65 basically just has some economic questions. I think depending on how long your SIE was, I think you'd be okay on. Why don't you go take your 65, 63? You don't have to wait for the 30 days. And I'll be damned, Vince. Vince, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the following week he did the 65, and like 3 days later he did the 63. He's back in business. So my recommendation is, yes, you should consider that. I just told you, Acolyte, to get the printout for the 66 test specifications. Do the same with 63, 65. Look over those test specifications published by NASA. And you can compare and contrast, and you'll see there's more comparison that overlaps than contrasting points that aren't there. So yeah, strongly consider it. I don't know you well enough to recommend it. In Vince's case, I actually recommended he do that. I don't, have enough data and feedback with you. Maybe join me for a Q&A jam sessions where we can talk some more, and we can be better at where I tell you that's definitely something you should do. Or I can say this, you should definitely consider it. Lady Brill in the house. Lady Brill, welcome. We always like our alumna to come back and say hi. It's good for morale. I don't know why you wouldn't want to believe me about what is on your exam, but victorious test takers are always welcome on a Tuesday. Part of our Tuesday ritual community meeting is not only to provide you with content, but to that fun and fellowship. Since COVID, a lot of us no longer are taking these tests in a cohort with fellow test takers where, if we have a bad day, we can buck you up, take you lunch, or take you out adult beverage after work. And so you're not all alone. And so get plugged in, find your community, whether it's our Facebook community, our Reddit community, our Tuesday night, stay plugged in, share your victories and your defeats. And, you're not alone. Daniel, I didn't understand your question about how to access. I think you sent me an email about how to access the Q&A jam session. It's pretty simple. It's deantenney.tutoring.setmore.com. You go to the class tab. So I'm not sure where the confusion is, but I'm more than happy to help you with that. There's a class tab, there's a tutoring tab, there's a shared screen tab. So it's pretty straightforward. Brian 66 to supplement. Yeah, sometimes, Acolyte, I say this. Sometimes I'll use the sports analogy. Sometimes a coach gets fired, test prep vendor, substitute for the coach. Not because they don't know their X's and O's, not because they're not a great coach. They just lose the locker room. And what does that mean? Their voice is no longer having impact. And, I had somebody who told me they watched every one of my videos and they missed their mark. And I said, well, don't watch any more of my videos for whatever reason. That's not working, right? So I strongly suggest getting a different voice. Brian's voice, I think, is a great investment as a paid supplement. Absolutely. He's got the videos. He's got his class notes. He's got that practice test, all in about $100. And I think that's a really worthwhile investment. I would also act like, I don't know what your test prep vendor is, but the other thing I usually ask when somebody tells me they got that kind of score is if it's Kaplan, which I'm more familiar with than other test prep vendors, I go, let's go look at your QBank usage. Now, it kind of hurts my heart, but what I want to see is whether they should buy a different vendor. If they've, got 80, 90% QBank usage rate, then they probably need to buy another vendor, get some more questions, get a different voice. But what hurts my heart, Acolyte, is when I'm doing the QBank usage rate and they've only used 40% of their questions. I'm like, what? I don't know how many questions you should do, but boy, I'm not a corporate trainer, but if I were, one thing we can monitor is your QBank usage rate. So I don't think you should mindlessly be doing practice questions. I had somebody the other day, I'd say, listen, you need to lay some more base knowledge. You don't need to be doing practice tests because the scores are terrible. You need to do that towards the end of that. But I would say consider that, getting that supplement, and consider those extra questions. And I'd be interested in that QBank usage rate. If you're past 75, 80% on whatever test vendor you're using on the practice questions, maybe consider getting some more practice questions. Series 7, testing in over a week. 70, I don't like a 62, 64, 70, 70. I've been reading like a madman. That's exactly what you should do. What would you recommend to get over the hump? I don't know how are you doing these one a day, every other day? I would like you to be in the mid 70s. Many people pass with those kind of scores. So, but we want to have a margin of safety. So I'd like you to be able to push that into the mid 70s. And you're doing the right thing by remediating like a madman. If you're testing in a week, maybe we get 3 more practice test scores. You shouldn't be doing more than 1 a day, and you should take as much time remediating as you're actually doing the exam. So I would like to see 3 more scores as a minimum after remediation, not mindlessly doing practice tests. We're not doing practice tests to learn. We're doing practice tests to take an intellectual inventory and see where we're at, right? I'm not worried about a 70 a week out, another 62, and I'd be concerned, right? Because, low 60s is not where you want to be. So get a couple more scores, circle back, Daniel, or join me for the office hour or the Q&A jam session. We can talk some more. There are several ratios in my textbook. There certainly are. On fundamental analysis. Well, Noah, I have a video on fundamental analysis. It's a class replay where I tear apart a balance sheet. I'll link that in the video description and check that out. I don't think fundamental analysis is a big deal on the Series 7 as it is for 65 and 66. But the ratios, there's not a whole bunch of them in terms of fundamental analysis. There are three. Their current ratio, right? So, several ratios. Current ratio is your current assets divided by your current liabilities. So what is Dean's current assets? Cash are things I plan to turn to cash within the next 12 months, right? What are my current liabilities? Things I plan to pay in the next 12 months. I like to have, knowing in my life, a lot of liquidity. And so I have a very high current ratio. How much money I got cash to how much I owe, right? Now, we don't, as a business, want to have to liquidate our inventory to pay our bills, right? If we have to do an inventory reduction sale, we're not going to get as much as we otherwise would get. So a more stringent liquidity, what we're measuring as liquidity, is this what we call the quick ratio or acid test ratio. So now we take the current assets, we minus the inventory. Ratio always means division, by the way. So anytime you hear ratio, you're going to divide. If you don't know what to do in terms of math on any of the exams, take the first number in the question and divide it by the second number in the question. That takes care of about 90% of math, right? So ratio means division. And then we get what's called our quick or acid test ratio. Now, in my personal balance sheet, by the way, the balance sheet tells one, two levels, customer level, but also, fundamental analysis. And, in my situation, Guru Exam Prep, I don't have any inventory purposely, right? I don't have books. I don't sell books. I don't sell notes. I don't sell any of that stuff. I don't sell coffee cups. I don't sell nothing. So I don't have any inventory. But, businesses that have inventory, that would be an issue. Now, the last one is about solvency, not liquidity. Solvency is different than liquidity. Liquidity, I had my friends start picking up my bar tabs in San Francisco. This was, 10, 15 years ago. And I thought, what is up? Why are, people starting to pick up my bar tab? And they didn't understand what I said. I had a liquidity crisis. They thought I was poor. I'm not poor. I was just sucking it up because I didn't want to have to sell long-term asset, turn it into cash. So I thought I'll just suck it up and I'll get my taxes paid and life will be good. So finally I said, what is this about? And they said, oh, Dean, we hear you're having financial difficulties. I go, no. It's not, I'm fine. So in terms of capitalizing a business, a corporation, there's no such thing as a corporation that hasn't issued common stock. So we're going to have in capitalization, certainly going to have equity, common stock. We might issue preferred stock. We might also have retained earnings that we didn't distribute to shareholders. So that's the equity component of the balance sheet. Now, in my case, I have no long-term liabilities, so it would be almost impossible for me to go bankrupt because I don't owe anybody any money. And a company that doesn't issue any bonds, okay, well, all they have is equity, right? But some companies issue both equity and debt. So capitalization of a corporation is the equity, shareholder equity, plus the long-term debt, the bonds. That's called total capitalization. Right now, some of the tech companies, Alphabet, Microsoft, are saying one of the advantages they have is the amount of capital they have. They can throw tens and 30, 40 billions of dollars building data centers because they have those resources, right? So this is also a function of resources. All right, now the last ratio we're concerned with is debt to total capital. How leveraged is our corporation? Leverage is financial speed, right? And that would be our last one, debt, long-term debt, bonds, divided by total cap. Again, for solvency. Think about it as a mortgage. I ask, how did you capitalize your house? I'm asking how much equity and debt. So by way of review, A, B, C, most of these are recognition questions, not so much practical application, depending on your draw, particularly on Series 7, very, very low probability. On 65, 66, much higher probability. But on the exam, I say what best describes current ratio, you would chop the answer set, current assets divided by current liabilities. What best describes the quick or asset test ratio? Flashcards, right? You would say quick assets, that's the current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities. I said what best describes debt to total capital, long-term bonds divided by total cap. So it's mainly recognition. I would put one more there, Noah, on your Series 7. It's not a ratio, but it's a balance sheet calculation. And you should definitely know the classical balance sheet equation, assets minus liabilities equals shareholder equity, or assets equals liabilities plus shareholder equity. That's why it's called a balance sheet, both sides balance. And then I would definitely know, and I'd add to your mix, it's not a ratio, but working capital. Working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. And on a bad draw, these are all very low probability on your 7, but on a bad draw, I might ask you the effect of something on the balance sheet. For example, if a company declares a dividend, it becomes a current liability, and then that causes working capital decrease, for example. Okay, a little overkill, but is what it is. The drink for today is another gift from one of my students, Johnny Walker Blue. Woo-hoo. That's a nice blended scotch. That's one of the better blended scotches. So that is what we're drinking. No, Brian, I don't know. Yasha, Brian, who knows? It's holidays, and sometimes he has a ball game or he has his significant other. He does something. So I try not to bother him and say, hey, where are you? So I don't know. I'll get a report later on, probably. He was at a game or he was doing something. Different equations. I think I just answered that. Did I not? I think I did, Noah. Is it important? If you let me put it this way. If you tell me you missed your Series 7 because of balance sheets and income statements, I'm going to say you had bigger problems elsewhere, my friend. Much bigger problems. You do have to distinguish between fundamental and technical analysis. But the reason it's not high probability is because we have research departments and research analysts that do this. We don't do this. As a retail broker, we're intermediaries between the research that's being done, the fundamental analysis, and the client. So I don't think it's as important as knowing options, munis, and mutual funds, for example. Joining from North Carolina, woohoo! Boy, I'll tell you, a lot of financial institutions there in North Carolina. Vanguard's got a big campus there, and LPL has a big campus there, and of course, Bank of America, woohoo! Past the Series 7, woohoo! We ring the bell for victorious test takers and raise an adult beverage, waste an adult beverage in your honor. And 63. Your Series 7 playlist in Mighty 90s, and we're so helpful. Well, you're welcome, Georgia. It's always very, very gratifying when our content contributes to testing victories. What has made our channel number one, we have over 7 million views. We have more subscribers than any other channel. We have more videos. It's a pretty simple business. And what I mean by that is if we can contribute to testing victories, people are happy. And then they send us referrals, and that's what's led to our success. So I'm glad to hear that. Taking the 6 on Monday, how would you best describe variable life universal? I don't know how we describe it. I would say that make sure that you're not going to get a lot of life insurance on your 6 anyways, because you're taking a test to sell mutual funds, not life insurance. I would know that life insurance cannot be sold as an investment, and that includes variable life, but it gives you flexibility, I guess is what I would say, is contrasted to a traditional insurance policy. Once in a very blue moon, they will ask a question about hypothetical illustrations on variable universal life. And if you're showing a hypothetical illustration, you can't go higher than 10, and then you have to have a 0 in the time frame. But I wouldn't worry about that on your 6. I would spend time, Elvis, on retail communication. Variable annuities, way more testable than variable life. I would really hammer the mutual funds again and customer accounts again in your SIE. That's a lot of overlap. I always want people to really work hard on the SIE, because if you work hard on the SIE, you could almost test out of a Series 6, and you're laying a good base for your Series 7. All right. Woo! SIE. So the journey of, I always say, the journey of 3-0 begins with 1-0, right? So you're on your way. What's your second testing victory? Is it going to be a 6 or is it going to be a 7? Oh, thanks so much for joining us from LinkedIn. Always warms my heart. We broadcast to Facebook, LinkedIn, And our primary platform is YouTube. But always warms my heart when I see somebody from Facebook or LinkedIn joining us. SIN 6 onto the 63, 65. There you go. So you're going to do more than a hat trick, and hat trick plus one. Right. So I think the biggest challenge down there is going to be that 65. So as compared to your SIE, your 6 and your 63 testing victories, respect that 65. That is a bigger dragon than those other dragons. There you go. Marcel, how are you? Happy 4th, Marcel. Can't wait to see you out in Vegas or whenever I see you. Drag Brian. I can't believe somebody like Brian has not been to New Orleans before. We've got to check that box for him for sure. So whether we see you in Las Vegas or we see you in New Orleans, we're going to make it happen. I always tell Mom when you say hi, I say, Marcel popped in and said to make sure I told you hello on his behalf. The 10 is such a slog, man. Volkswagen. It is a 67. Ugh. Retaking 20 days. Any suggestions for the next 3 weeks? I like the Kaplan Q Bank. So a couple of things. I don't know how much you did. I used my Series 10 playlist. I do have a Series 10 practice exam expleted where you can watch me take it, hit pause, hit play. I can be very helpful, Volkswagen, on your Kaplan Q Bank. You can just send me the QID, and I'm more than happy to help you or send you a Zoom link or something. If you're going to do that, send it to me at dean@guruexamprep.com and put Series 10 in the heading. So I get a lot of unsolicited emails. So, if I don't respond, just feel free to nudge me and say, WTF, send me any of those questions you have. You're so close that I agree with you. That's really exasperating. But boy, that thing is a slog for sure. So I don't know what you did last time. And a lot of times, I don't know if this is you again, but sometimes what makes 9s and 10s and 24s tough is because you're not a baby broker. You're not a tabula rasa. You're not a blank slate. You have a lot of other things going on. I had a guy who was taking his Series 10. I said, listen, you got to get rid of these distractions. And he got really mad at me. He said, Dean, my wife and kids are not a distraction. I go, you misunderstood me. Let's stipulate your wife and kids are certainly assets, not liabilities. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you can't do the 10 and 15 minutes here and 30 minutes at lunch and, 30 minutes after work. And if you have direct reports, you got to, tell them to, give you some space and time to do this. You got to carve out that hour or 90 minutes where you're just, working on Series 10. And that's much harder. As I said, I get it. It's harder when you have other commitments, perhaps. I know, listen, before somebody gets mad at me, I realize that some of you Series 7s are not baby brokers and you're not right out of college and you have other things going on too. I get it. I'm just saying the 9s, 10s, 24s, the 4s, 53s, those are, usually people already that have a lot of stuff on the table. I'll say it that way. So feel free. Again, you can join me, Volkswagen, if you'd like, for one of my paid office hours. That's usually for paid students, but you feel free to register for that on my booking page. I've taken the test several times and have come close every single time. Ugh. Rodolfo, I had this earlier in the live stream. Took it December 24. I haven't touched the materials. Next step is start over this month. What do I recommend? Okay, so as I've said earlier, Rodolfo, when you come close every single time, several times, I don't think that is a knowledge deficit problem. I don't think it's not that you put in the work. I think it's some other variable, like test taking anxiety or test taking techniques. It's some other something. And so what we would try and do is identify that. I would say kick off this newest study effort by trying to, do a practice test and see how much residual's up there. I don't think I've seen here what test you're taking. I've taken a test. I would like to know, Rodolfo, what test that is. Is it the SIE? Is it the 7? Is it 24? You took it December 24, haven't touched the materials. I kind of like that, you gave it a rest. So what is this, 6 months later? So start by doing a practice test. And thanks so much for joining us from Facebook. Oh, there we go, 65. Well, yeah, that's 65. I think, Rodolfo, the 65 is one of the toughest exams because it's a lot of stuff. And it doesn't really have a narrative thread to it. So sometimes Series 7s are incredulous when I say, I think the 65 is harder than the 7. Like, how could you think that? there's no multiple option strategies. There's no this. I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, because it doesn't have a narrative thread. The 7 has a narrative thread, like find a customer, open an account, make an investment. What happens backstage, So the 65 is over here, then it's over there, and then it's over here again. So make sure you do print out Rodolfo. And I always mention this for every exam, but particularly 65. Print the NASA test specification PDF. Every study session, I would have that next to me as I study. And I would try and make sure I can put a check mark next to each item on that test specification sheet that I intellectually own that for this next attempt. Just passed the SIE. Woo! Yeah, 15 hours. Everybody's different. Look at taking my 7 as soon as possible. I know it's more in depth. I think once you're in this testing mode, you should just keep rolling. So if you got your SIE and you sound like you're aggressive, and I love that as a test taker, I would say maybe go 4 weeks, 5 weeks. That's pretty aggressive. I don't know if you're a full-time studier or a part-time studier, but it's definitely much more in depth. Yeah, I'd say 4 or 5 weeks. Failed my 66 3 times. Was planning the 63, 65, but I like that as a plan B. Your 6-month window is August. So, well, why not? So here you go. I think the ideal solution is to pass the 66. But if you think about it, this adds 3 more at bats, right? So you could consider the 63, 65 plan B, and you can figure it's batting practice for your next 66 coming up, right? And the good news on the 63, 65 route is, again, warm up for your 66. Maybe you pass it. You don't have to worry about it. But the other thing is that you get 3 more bites, 2 more, 4 more at bats, right? Because you can take the 63 3 times. You can take the 65. I don't suggest doing it the hard way, but everybody's testing journey is different. Some testing journeys are pretty smooth, and other testing journeys can get a little rocky. So, the idea that you can take the 63 3 times and the 65 3 more times, and then you can take the 66, but it's that 7 at bats, So I would consider that strongly. It won't affect your 66, by the way. I would have the 66 as your plan C, right? So 63, 65 plan B, you can take that anytime you want. There's a lot of overlap. I can't imagine you're not going to be able to pass out of the regs part of 65 based on 63. 63 is just regs, laws and regulations. And 65 is a lot of investment stuff, more investment stuff than the 66. But always taking 1 test is better than taking 2, ideally, right? So I'm not telling people. I've heard people recommending, well, instead of taking the 66, take a 63, 65. That's just asinine. Why would you want to take 2 tests instead of 1? In fact, they created the 66 so people didn't have to take 2 tests. That was the whole point of creating the 66. So as a plan B, as a backup plan, I like it. I do recommend it. Dean, taking the 66 tomorrow. Andrew, what are you doing here? You should be getting some sleep. That is exactly how it'll be tested tomorrow. Qualified dividends are taxed at long-term capital gains rate, a lower rate than ordinary income. A non-qualified dividend is taxed at your ordinary income tax rate, right? So if you have a dividend and it's qualified, that's exactly the test question. The test question is not about what makes it qualified. It's how long you've held it before the record date. It's that it's going to be taxed at a lower rate, long-term capital gain rate, instead of ordinary income. So it's an aim and shoot point and click question. Passed my SIE today. Woo! No finance experience or degree. A lot of people in our business do very, very well because they don't have their mind clouded with finance or experience. There you go. Thank you. You're so welcome, Jessica. You're so welcome. Now, free is a pretty good price point. I did have, Jessica, a guy who, I don't know what happened there. Let me get rid of that. I did have a person who was complaining about how many commercials they had to watch on my YouTube channel. And I said, listen, I am like you. I hate commercials as well. And that's why I pay $20 a month to be able to watch YouTube without commercials. So I say, listen, tutoring, I charge $300 an hour. So I still think free is a good value proposition. But one way to avoid the commercials is book tutoring with me. I said, or you pay $20 a month. Now, if you're taking like SIE and the Series 7 and 66, maybe your testing journey is 6 months. 6 times 20 $120, you don't have to watch commercials anymore. And then Jessica said, well, that's okay. I'll just suffer. I said, boy, if in your life suffering is watching commercials on YouTube, you are pretty blessed, because there is real suffering in people's lives, and it isn't watching commercials on YouTube. And then Jessica, I couldn't believe this guy. He goes, well, you're greedy. I said, well, you're cheap. So I guess we're made for each other. Studying for 65. Yeah, if you have time, I like it. At least make sure you read. I get this all the time. People say, oh, Dean, you're always referring to reading the book. What book? Is it the Bible? Is it the Holy Bible, King James Version? I go, no. Whatever book came with your test prep vendor. I mean, as a minimum, every test prep vendor has a book. And I think you should read that book cover to cover. Now, we talked about Silvermine, Different Voices. Right now I'm reviewing Notman Marx's Series 24. And, they say things differently than I would say things, but, getting a different voice. Now, make sure the different voice doesn't confuse you. But I'm in favor of reading 2 books, but I'm a guy who likes to read. So, maybe that's different for other folks. But yeah, I highly recommend that. Yeah, different ways. Be careful. Just like I say, be careful of, like, for example, I teach options a little different than Notman Marx teaches options. And you just want to pick what works for you and then lock it in. You don't want to be trying to learn 3-4 different ways to do things. So, again, I use the analogy of a buffet. Find what speaks to you and then lock it in. Right. See the pass rate for the 60 is, yeah, because it's a much smaller exam. That's the danger. There's not as many performance opportunities. Yeah, there you go, 70 questions. Pretty fresh material might take it 2 weeks. Yeah, I think you could take in a week. When I had people working for me, once they passed their 7, I would handle the 63 study materials and say, I'd like this done in the next 7 to 10 days. So, you can do it sooner is my point. Test 7 tomorrow. Well, those of you who are testing tomorrow, I certainly appreciate you joining us for the live stream. Thank you so much. But the biggest thing is to make sure that tonight you try and get us some rest. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm tired, my reading skills are greatly diminished. And, you got to make sure your reading skills are in as top form as possible. That means trying to get a good night's rest. The days of cramming the night before are over. So I don't recommend any last minute prep. The only thing I would recommend is making sure you don't lose your rhythm. So if you want to do some practice questions or watch one of my videos, Mighty 90 or your 7 to 60 minutes, that's fine. But you shouldn't be trying to learn new stuff tonight. You should try to get a good night's rest. And then the most important thing at this point, because the execution or study plan is over, the most important thing is now to be confident in the execution of that study plan that is over. And most importantly, tomorrow, be confident in your answers and be confident in yourself, right? Confidence is worth a lot of points. So I got a 69 on the first try. Ugh, Molly, that hurts my heart. Those high scores. Ugh. Taking an X, putting it on my cheat sheet, options chart, numbers and record keeping. Yeah. If you Google data dump sheets or cheat sheet series 7, a lot of idea inspiration will show up. I would want you to have your own cheat sheet. I'd certainly have the options matrix. I discussed this in my video called Series 7 Tips, Tricks, and Memory Aids. And when I conclude that video, I say these are things you might want to consider for your cheat sheet or data dump sheet. Molly, I would certainly have my teeter-totter, my matrix, maybe my classical margin equation. The way I think of a data dump sheet or cheat sheet, Molly, is if I told you could have one sheet of paper on it, anything front and back that you could take in the exam with you, what would be on that sheet of paper? Everybody's would be different. I'd say, Molly, give that some thought. Try and do that. And then, use that as your model. And every night before you go to bed, every morning when you wake up, try and do that data dump sheet, because that's when your brain is at its best. If you did that, by now in test time, you'd be able to go in the exam and do what I call a data dump. I don't like calling them cheat sheets, Molly, because I'm just afraid somebody might label it a cheat sheet and forget it at the exam site or something. But you get 2 pieces of laminated paper. Now, the clock will be running against you. Record keeping, I wouldn't put that there, but everybody's different. Lifetime, 65432 or 23456 lifetime. Certainly, whatever you want to put on it, right? I sometimes like to have a working model, like a spread or a straddle, just so I can use to extrapolate. So everybody's a little different, right? But I recommend it. By the way, the other reason I recommend it, I wouldn't do it, but the other reason I recommend it is because uh, sometimes it has a calming effect, Molly. So what I mean by a calming effect is that your brain is starting to say, oh, series 7 time, right? So you're warming up by doing the data dump sheet instead of warming up, on the real test. So that's the other reason I kind of like that as a kind of a placebo, so to speak. I had somebody a company that called me and said, Dean, the cheat sheet you're passing out in your class is not correct. I said, well, I don't have a cheat sheet. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't hand out anything in class. I'm not interested in people who have physical ownership of the content, intellectual content. So I have no idea what you're talking about. So anyways, they sent me a copy of the matrix, and this guy had, put bulls and bears on it. It was beautiful. But at this firm, Molly, they had photocopied this cheat sheet so often, the pluses turned into minuses. Oh my God. And then Molly, I've had people say, Dean, I memorized my cheat sheet. It didn't help. I go, show me what you memorized. Put it right here. And they weren't able to do it. So make sure you're flushing it out, because that's what you got to do when you get the exam. You don't get to bring that in with you, right? So you got to make sure you can do it. It's the other reason I'm not as big a fan of Quizlet is perhaps other folks, because I think there's something to be said for writing your own flashcards. Right now, my company gives you 3 hours a day. There you go. I like that. I would recommend breaking that into 2 90-minute study sessions. The idea that you're going to study any exam for 3 hours in one block, I think is not happening. Most people aren't wired for 3 hours of sustained concentration. So I would like to do 90 minutes. I call that a study block. Or if you're going to make a study block, 60 minutes, 3 study blocks, but I think 2. And I'd like 90 minutes with 30 minutes as a minimum of a break. You got to refresh and reset. So if you're going to do that in the morning, 6, 7:30, break, 8 to 9:30. Maybe you do one in the morning, one in the afternoon. If you're doing the ones in the afternoon, maybe make sure you're doing the more active stuff in the morning when you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. That, by the way, is for every exam. I suggest study blocks. If you're a full-time studier, I think 6 study blocks, 4 study blocks a day of 90 minutes with a 30-minute break. If you think about it, that's 6 hours. That's plenty. More than that, you start to burn out. You got to, so 90 minutes, 30-minute break, 90 minutes, 30-minute break, 90 minutes, 30 minutes break. That's 6 hours in an 8-hour day. That's a full study day. And then I would also, Volkswagen, all exams this goes for, I would also recommend that you rotate the activity. So I'm not going to be reading for 3 hours in a day. Maybe the first 90-minute block I read, second 90 minutes I do practice questions. Maybe I do practice questions in the morning. Maybe I watch a video in the afternoon, or 2 videos, right? So I recommend study blocks, and I recommend doing, if you're a part-time studier, same thing. I say, how many study blocks can we do during the week? How many can you do on weekends? Again, no more than 4 on a Saturday, or I always suggest people step it down on Sunday. So if they're doing 4, then 3. If they're doing 3, then 2. I don't know when you're testing again. Also, I apologize if you already told us in a previous this, but I also recommend you take 1 day off a week. So maybe you work on Sunday on your own time, or you just take Monday, just do your normal gig. That's, again, for everybody. So your break and lay fallow, kind of recharge, and so that's my recommendation. 3 hour do QBank questions. Okay, well, I would do not 3 hours of QBank. I would do 90 minutes of QBank and then 90 minutes on remediation of those QBank questions, right? So that's what I would recommend. Now, as you know, that Series 10 is a long slog. It's 150, so you may not be able to get through a practice test in one session. Silent listening here, past the 7. Woo! Kudos. Series 7 Dragon Slayer. I got my Game of Thrones glass here. That's what I do. I drink and I know things. That's from Peter Dinklage in Game of Thrones. That was his quote. Kudos. Well, man, I love that. That sounds like somebody who has some money. Igor D. Carvalho da Costa. Love that. Ooh. I don't like you fail by 4%. That's not good. Got 66. Yeah, disappointed suggestions. Yeah, I hate these scores. As I've said now, this is, I think, the 3rd time, but those are really disappointing because most firms, by the way, that's why they let you go back and take it again. Most people in our business know that those 60 plus, high 60s, 70, we know that's not that you weren't dedicated, you weren't disciplined, you weren't organized. It's some other variable. So what you got to do is try and find that variable. I do, as I said, and I'll link in the video description to my podcast episode called You Failed, Is It Over? Spoiler alert, the answer is no. And in that, I have 5 recommendations about how to respond to this misfortune of missing your mark. So I'll put that in the video description. The first of those steps is to do an intellectual inventory. Print out your test specifications on 66. It matches perfectly with your printout, and you can hopefully find some of those subject areas we can shore up for next attempt. Yeah, there you go. There you go. By the way, you remember, nobody cares about this in your career. They're all very successful men and women in our business who had a rocky testing journey. Now, it's just a rite of passage. It's a barrier to entry into the securities industry. One of my best brokers took the test 5 times. I don't recommend that, but I love Igor that every time he came back, he didn't blame his test prep vendor. He didn't blame, the tutor. He just said, I'm going to get it next time. And he just assumed I was going to continue to send him down there. And I did, because I thought, man, if this guy can respond to this misfortune in this way, he's going to be great, because, he's not fragile. And then he used to go out and use it in his presentations. He'd say, Igor, if anybody knows this stuff, it's me. I had to take the STAM test 5 times. People invest with you because they like you and they trust you, not because you can pass a test. In fact, I'm not sure, but we don't give passing scores anymore. And I think one reason we maybe don't give passing scores is if you worked for me and you got over a 90, I'd say, Igor, I think I should fire you now. 2 reasons. One, if you got a 90, you're, smarter than me, and how am I going to supervise you? 2, you're just proving you're a big jerk as the person who wrote the test. And we're going to be spending a lot of time together. We spend more time with our peers in the office than we do sometimes with our family. And I don't want you hanging out with somebody like that. I want to hang out with people I like. So that may be one reason we don't give scores anymore. As I said, it's the rite of passage. I had a Russell who was a client of mine, and he knew that I had made a $30,000 commission on this transaction. And he said, Dean, I could refer other people to you, and you could give me part of that commission. I said, Russell, that's a wonderful idea. And I handed him a bunch of books, and he said, what is this? I said, these are the study materials for your SIE, your 7 and 66. Once you pass those, if you refer somebody and we make that $24,000 or $30,000, you can have half that. He goes, well, I don't want to do that. And I said, I thought I didn't think you did. So all I can say is thank you very much. Right. So, Igor, you got to kind of think long-term, and long-term, this is just a blip, right? You got to kind of be thinking of long-term. I don't know. I told you, I love that name of yours. It's a really interesting name, but I don't know. You may already be rich for all I know. But if you're poor and you deserve to be rich, boy, our securities industry, I think, is the best industry for such folks, right? So if you're in our business any length of time, I think you'll do well. And I take some heat sometimes for telling people, because people ask me for advice on getting their first job in the securities industry. And I always say I'd be more interested in the learning experience than the pay. I know sometimes we got to have enough pay to pay our bills, but it's the people we're going to hang out with. Who's your good mentor? What are you going to learn? I feel very fortunate I was able to, have some really great mentors that I work for. And the money, will take care of itself at some point. My former boss, was telling me, I said, well, Jeff, the reason people leave you like me is because at some point you don't step up and pay them. So they're going to go free agent, right? Use a Brave browser. No, I don't. Oh, I never heard of that. Silvermine. Never heard of that. Absolutely. Sweat equity investment. There's no better sweat equity investment you can make in yourself. I realize starting out, you might have to be a little more frugal than you would like to. But if you have the resources, like we had somebody who was considering buying a Teskica paid supplement. We had somebody who was considering adding STC to their Kaplan. Yeah, for sure. You put in your own sweat equity investment, but if you can add more arrows to your quiver, certainly do so. Well, I don't know about that. That's the first time I've ever heard that one. Well, my pleasure. That's what we're here Tuesday nights to do. That's what we're here Tuesday nights, every Tuesday night. Besides options, heavily tested topics. So, Gabe, in social media, we had somebody who was asking this question, and I respond the same way. Make sure that you pay attention to the test content outline of Series 7. Function 1 on the content outline is finding a customer. Function 2 is opening the customer account. Function 3 is providing basic information on investments. Function 3 is 91 questions on providing investment information, product information to customers. In that area is options. And you're going to get 20 option questions plus or minus 5. So, you told me 15 or 25, I wouldn't be surprised. But options, munis, municipals are 20 plus or minus 5. Mutual funds are plus 20 plus or minus 5. So about 60 plus or minus 10, 15 is going to be options, munis, and mutual funds. For those of you about to test, we salute you. This guy in social media, Gabe, he told me he's going to go for it in 7-10 days. And, I said, well, geez, I think that's pretty foolish, but is what it is. Make sure you do as much work as you can on options, munis, and mutual funds. There you go. Yeah, well, Filter, good point. Good point, Gabe. So the 3 styles of questions you get on your Series 7 are recognition, practical application, and judgment questions. You cannot on your Series 7 be giving up recognition questions. Like, when do trades settle T+1? When does the option agreement have to be back? 15 days from account approval. You can't be giving up recognition questions. You can't give up practical application questions. There's no interpretation of what is the current yield on a bond, for example, or what is the current yield on a stock. What is the break even of the spread? Those are practical application questions. You can't be giving those up. The hardest questions on Series 7 are judgment questions. And I think that's the biggest difference between the SIE and the Series 7. The SIE is primarily recognition, maybe 3-4 practical application questions, couple judgment questions. Series 7, about 10% of the Series 7 are judgment questions. And Filter, your point, suitability questions are judgment questions. And I think that people make the mistake of trying to do suitability before they understand the product. And so if you are informed on the products, the investment vehicle, then you'll know who that vehicle is appropriate for or inappropriate for. So, for example, partnerships aren't liquid, very testable. That's a suitability question, right? So I would attack suitability through product knowledge, right? Now, I do have a suitability playlist, a whole Series 7 suitability playlist, and check that out. I'll put it in the video description. I usually put the video descriptions in the morning, or tonight I'm probably going to put the video description, but I'll put that playlist there for you and check that out. People do struggle on suitability as it relates to the exam. Taking my SIE in 20 days from today. I like it. Is this enough time? Absolutely. Absolutely. There you go. I think 20 is plenty of time. I don't know if you're a full-time or part-time studier, but I wouldn't be concerned about a 20-day time frame to pass the SIE. Got a 63, then a 69 on the 66. Wow, that sounds like a mouthful there, Sarah. 63, 69. Hike. Going for the third try in 2 weeks. Okay. So third try is serious, right? Because the third try, if you don't make it, then you got 180 day wait period. I don't know, Sarah, how long you've been in the live stream with us, but remember, I do recommend a backup plan, a plan B, if for some reason you missed this. I feel good about the 63, 69. You make that same improvement, you're going to make your mark. Firm provided STC, like it. You've been using Kaplan, I like it. You're supplementing, I love it. The Test Geek videos are dynamite. Sarah, if you haven't already done it, your videos from Test Geek come with a practice test. And put that aside, and maybe 2-3 days out, do that Test Geek practice exam. It's also available on the channel as in the playlist for practice tests. And it has very strong correlation to the actual exam. So save that as one of your last intellectual inventories. There you go. I got to keep it clean, guys. Keep it clean. Take my Series 7 next week. I've been taking Past Perfect Count. What else do you recommend I do to prepare for the next week? Well, I'd like to see what those scores are. Maybe you can tell us what your practice scores are, Mason. I would continue to rinse and repeat and do remediation. Assuming your past perfect scores and Kaplan scores are in the mid 70s, I think rinse and repeat. I don't think there's any reason to change what you're doing. If those practice scores higher, the better. But if they're not in the mid 70s, then you would probably circle back and do some remediation so we can push those practice test scores into the mid 70s. Well, I like it. So the Kaplan Q Bank, the master exam, when we gave Kaplan, I'm not a Kaplan employee, but Kaplan pays me to do review and help with content. I'm reviewing their latest Series 7 book. And anyway, so I'm more familiar with Kaplan's content than I am other test prep vendors. But I'm agnostic. I help, on the channel, you'll find Nopman Mark's content. You'll find STC content on the channel. That being said, when Kaplan could get passing scores, the variance from the mastery exam to the actual exam was anywhere from 5 to 12 points. So that's the variance. If you're taking a 66, that variance, that standard deviation, that range is in your favor. So if we add 5 to your 64, 69, you're in striking distance, right? So I'm not worried about that 64 score. And many people get mid 60s on the mastery and still pass their exam because I told you of that variance. Now we don't get passing scores. Kaplan doesn't. So, it's harder to kind of come up with that. But I think you're in good shape. I really do. So I wouldn't be concerned. If I were your corporate trainer, your accountability partner, I'd feel really good with where you're at. Well, that's just your opinion. It used to be 70. You're probably not going to want to hear this, but they used to be 70 for all tests. Right? So, yeah, I'm with you. But that's what it used to be, and they moved it up. Well, thank you. Well, that's okay. Yeah, that's the right attitude, right? You'll come back stronger. That's exactly the right answer, right? Yeah. By the way, you got to think of yourself as a growth stock, right? So you're going to be reinvesting in yourself, and your timeline is much longer than mine, right? I'm old enough now. I don't even buy green bananas. No, I'm joking. But somebody asked me why my recommendations for what I do with my own money is different than theirs. And I said, well, because I'm an old man and you're a young man. So, our situations are different. Yeah, there you go. You got your 66. Wow. I forget, most testing journeys back in the day. So act like back in the day, you couldn't take a 9 or 10 until you took 2 years as a 7. And back in the day, you'd have a weight on the 24. And I forget sometimes that people now have a testing journey right out of the gate where it's SIE 7, 66, 9, 10, or SIE 7, 66, 24. So, wow, that's kudos on those other testing victories. And you'll get this 10 done for sure. You'll get the 10 done for sure. STC, a reputable vendor. I didn't say Kaplan is better. I think, I get so aggravated, Christian, and I'll rant a little bit. I get so aggravated in social media when people blame their test prep vendor, whether it's Kaplan, Past Perfect, or, Nopman Marks, and, rather than look in the mirror and hold themselves accountable. So if you have a reputable vendor, Past Perfect, Kaplan, STC, I don't know if I'm leaving anybody out. That's fine. STC, I didn't say Kaplan is better. I think Kaplan's Q banks are deeper and they're more easier to manipulate and they have a better performance tracker. So Kaplan, I think, is better. That's why I recommend Kaplan, right? That's why I teach classes for Kaplan. Kaplan hires Guru Exam Prep to deliver classes for them. So yeah, so I'm a Kaplan fan, but I don't think you're a risk with STC. You're welcome. No worries. SIE 20 days from day. I have all day to study for the 20 days. Wow. So remember, don't burn yourself out. Burnout is real. So as we said, I think 4 study blocks of 90 minutes with 30-minute breaks is an 8-hour study day. I think that's sufficient. I wouldn't do any more than that. I recommend in the next 20 days, 1 day a week that you take off. You don't do any of this stuff. Let your brain just kind of, think on it. No interest in a certain amount of hours. No, every hour is different. Everybody hours are different. How long they take to master this material. I think the better way to think about it is reverse engineer how much time you have from your test day, right? 20 days work backwards. So, this is T+1, training day 1, and you got a 20 T+20 is when you're testing, right? And then just work it that way. So If you're a full-time studier, I would want 6 to 8 hours of study time from you each day. Whether you want to take a day off or not, I'd leave that up to you. Yeah, it's tougher too. Notman Marks is a white glove provider, and I did get upset today. I told you this person, Brian Marks, is a really cool dude, and I know a lot of those people over there. I worked for that with them for decades, and they were slamming Notman Marks. I'm like, listen, I'm not your trainer. I don't work at your firm. And good news, you're anonymous. But again, don't be blaming Notman Marks. The variance is the same. So, Sir Brandon Rocks, you should pick up points from Notman to the actual exam. By design, by the way, all test prep vendors want you to be pleasantly surprised, right? That you weren't doing well and you picked up points. That's what they would like. Whoop. No worries, no worries. Well, Sir Dad, we're not interested in what you're doing trading wise, so who cares? We're here to talk about passing tests. What if discretionary authority is given to someone on your account and they start to make investments that are out of line with the original investment objective? Does the IA have to alert the owner? Well, we talked about suitability. I'm not sure what exam this would be, but discretionary authority means you gave that person the decision-making power over action, asset, and amount. And I wouldn't reach out to the customer to alert the owner. I would reach out to the customer and say, listen, I'm a little concerned that perhaps we need to update your new account form to reflect your looks like your changed investment objective. And that would be a way to open that discussion, right? So I don't know if you're talking about a practice question or you're talking about a 10 or a 24 or a judgment question, but I would say the answer is we don't alert the owner. There's a better way to go about that. Right? And you got to be careful because this could be their investment advisor, could be their nephew, whoever it is. So what I would do is I'd say, hey, Grayson, Dean Tenney here. I might check with my immediate supervisor. That's another great answer. If ever in the answer set it says check with your immediate supervisor, I would take that answer. And if I miss the mark, I tell my manager, they asked if I should check with you. And I said, yes. But I would open up the conversation by saying, hey, Grayson, I've just been going over your account here and looking at some trades. And I'm just wondering if we should update your new account form. I see the original investment objective was safety of principal. And I see that, you're now shorting straddles. And that seems to be kind of odd. Right? And they like to pretend I didn't know it was the third person. And say, well, what? I say, well, you didn't do that? Oh, the person with discretionary authority. Well, they're subjecting you to unlimited risk. Now, maybe you don't have that in your option agreement, but you get the idea, the general idea. So, Grace, I'd be interested if this is like a practice question or a real question you saw in the exam where it comes from. Thank you. I have a question. What's the easiest way to remember ranking on yields determined by rate changes? Well, it's pretty simple, Cheeseburger. If anybody ever asks you about investments, finance, or economics, and you want to sound smart, you should say it has a lot to do with interest rates. And if you just shut up, you sound good. And they say, what about it? And you say they fluctuate. They say, is that good news or bad news? You say, well, it depends. You say, but I do follow monetary policy. I like to see what the Fed's going to do in terms of interest rates. Now, we have, Cheeseburger, a great video called Teeter Totter, Seesaw, and I go over all these yields. And I think the way to remember it is that when you buy a bond at par, all the yields are the same. Right? So I lent Ford Motor Company $100,000. These were 8% debentures, callable in 5 years at par. So I'm expecting to get $4,000 every 6 months from Ford Motor Company, assuming they don't default. I didn't sell the bonds. They got called away from me at par. So the current yield, the nominal yield was 8%. That never fluctuates. My current yield was 8%, 8,000 divided by 100,000. I got called at par, so I made 8%. The yield to maturity is the same. Now, in the secondary market, I'm immune from the fluctuating interest rates because my bond portfolio is immune because I don't participate in the secondary market. I very rarely buy bonds, but when I do, I hold them to maturity. And so even though I'm getting a statement every quarter, what do I care, right? Because I'm not selling the bonds. But I say, Cheeseburger, If interest rates go up, the bond is going to go down. It's going to be trading at a discount. Now, we still may want to buy the bond at a discount. But if we're buying the bond at a discount, we're not interested in the nominal yield. We're not interested in current yield. We're interested in the yield to maturity. And I'll link to the teeter-totter, right? It would be nominal yield, current yield, yield to maturity, yield to call. What you want to know is low to high, and then you want to know what yield is the informative yield, the effective yield. It would be yield to maturity. If you buy, interest rates go down, the bond goes up, right? There's our teeter-totter. Right? If the bond goes up and we buy it at a premium, we may still want that bond cheeseburger, but we would want to know what is the call, because it's very likely the bond is going to get called and I'm not going to hold it to maturity, right? In my case, interest rates went down and Ford called the bonds away from me. So I didn't get the yield to maturity. Now, in the secondary market, they were trading at a premium. If you bought them at a premium, it would be from low to high, yield to call, yield to maturity, current yield, nominal yield, right? Low to high. Very testable on Series 7, particularly to know that under MSRB rules, any bond sold in the secondary market at premium, on the confirmation, you must have yield to call. Now, I've seen Cheeseburger a lot of memory aid tricks. One that Chuck, one of our Kaplan instructors likes to use YMCA, right? Yield to maturity, yield to call, So there's some mnemonics out there for that. But the ranking, I'll just give you the ranking. From low to high in a bond at a discount, it's going to be nominal yield, current yield, yield to maturity, yield to call, and the yield to maturity is what's important. On a bond at a premium, it's going to be nominal yield, current yield, yield to maturity, yield to call. And that yield to call, that lowest one, is very testable. Always. I have an SIE exam tomorrow. My scores have been in the 58s. Well, the variance is going to be in your favor. Yes. I think that Israel, stay calm, cool, and collected tomorrow. Be the test. Let the test come to you. I think there is a very good likelihood that you can pass tomorrow, particularly because it's past perfect. I told you in Kaplan, the variance is 5 to 12. So the stars are going to have to line up, but it's very possible. It's very possible. So give it your best shot. Be confident in yourself. Be confident in your answers tomorrow. And circle back next Tuesday. Let us know what happened to you. Yeah, there you go. Selection risk. All right. Looks like we're coming to the end of our hour. Making my ice cream money. I sometimes call it ice cream money. Differentiating who's who and who registers, very testable. Yeah, absolutely. That section, Mason, is called laws and regulations. I think it should be called laws and registrations. How do we register a security? If not, why not? How do we register a BD? If not, why not? How do we register an agent? If not, why not? How do we register an investment advisor? If not, why not? How do we register an investment advisor rep? If not, why not? Now, of those registration questions, the one that's most testable is the investment advisory firm and the investment advisor rep on 65 and 66. Oh, well, thank you so much for the super chat. Woohoo! All right, I guess I'm in charge of trying to get this Wheel of Fortune going. So we end our Tuesday live streams with a drawing for a free coaching call. You are not we're not drawing for a tutoring session at a date and time of your choice. What we're entering is a win in my YouTube, on my booking page. You go to coaching call for drawing winners and you bring whatever you want to talk about. And that's what we do. So what are we going to put in here? I'll put, now you have to put this into the chat exactly the way I have it on the screen, or it won't pick up. You never win, Marcel. Well, you are in a dry spell, but Marcel, we considered changing the rules because he won so often. He won. I don't forget, Marcel. What'd you win? Like 5 times in a row, some crazy thing. Okay, let me go get this on there. So, boom, share screen. Let's see, share screen. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. So, put pass in the chat if you'd like to participate. And we will. Now, remember, if you win, you do not win tutoring at a date and time of your choosing. What you win is the coaching call, and you go to deantenneytutoring.setboard.com, coaching call for winning, drawing winners, and then you just register for that. All right, let's go back. We have 7 participants. Anybody else want to participate? Again, Dan, it's got to be exactly as I have it. Capitals, PASS, exclamation point. If you put PA and you don't do it exactly for fresh Kixby, that won't work. It's got to be exactly how you see it on the screen, right? So it's got to be capital P, capital A, capital S with an exclamation. Yeah, I like that. You know, the book is, you know, not to be underrated. All right, looks like we got 16 here. Any more? Last call? Last call for alcohol. 18. Anybody else? All right, here we go. Boom. Isaac. Oh, right. One of our regulars. So Isaac, you know the drill, man. Just go to the coaching call. I don't know. I don't know, Isaac, if you matriculated. I thought you had. So if you have, you can certainly assign your coaching call to someone else. If not, I'll see you on the coaching call. We'll go over whatever you'd like to go over. Let me get rid of this. Boom, boom. Okay. Anybody got last minute questions before we call it a night? All right. Well, remember, oh, look at that. It's coming up right on my screen right now. Remember, inch by inch, your exam is a cinch. Yard by yard, your exam is hard. Can you see my ticker there? I like this next one. This is for you who asked, can you pass with a 58? Make sure tomorrow, my friend, here it comes. Make sure tomorrow that you take the test. Don't let the test take you. I asked Brian if I could put that up on our ticker, and he said yes. We got his permission there, right? So make sure you take the test. Don't let the test take you. If there are no other questions, I'll see you next Tuesday, 5 p.m. for our weekly live stream. It's 5 p.m. Arizona time each week. Bye-bye.